Seen from above, Britain is a green and pleasant land, full of treasures, often hidden in plain sight. Which is the grandest? Which is the most beloved? Which tells us the most about this United Kingdom? The White Cliffs of Dover? Scotland's Great Glen? The heights of Snowdonia? Or Northern Ireland's remarkable Giant's Causeway? We reveal the wonders that put the great into a nation like never before. Kent's White Cliffs of Dover is the iconic image of Britain, the essence of the UK as a rock-solid haven of freedom and democracy. For 2,000 years, Dover has been a gateway to Britain. Today, it's one of the world's leading ferry ports. When the Roman Emperor Claudius sent his galleys to invade Britain, the White Cliffs were what they saw first. Dover Castle didn't exist at that time in this form, but the Romans would have seen a fortification from the Iron Age on this site. They added to it, and the castle's Roman lighthouse is now the oldest building in England. After the Romans landed in southern Britain in 43 AD, it took them 4 years to conquer the tribes of the south, and another 30 to gain control of the West Country and Wales. This is a Roman military base near the village of Caerleon. It was once home to 5,000 elite troops. And nearby are the remains of an even greater treasure, a great oval amphitheatre. It was built around 90 AD, 47 years after the Romans first landed. 6,000 people would gather here to watch gladiators fight to the death. The Romans were in Wales for more than 300 years. This is the first Welsh town they founded, Venter Silurum, now called Carwyn. Sections of the original city walls still exist and are generally acknowledged to be one of the most perfectly preserved Roman fortifications in Northern Europe. Parts are around 17 feet high. The Romans left many things. This is arguably the most impressive. Hadrian's Wall. It's 73 miles long, stretching from the banks of the River Tyne in the east to the Solway Firth in the west. It took 6 years to build the limestone wall, on the orders of Emperor Hadrian. It was intended to protect the province of Britannia from the northern ancient Britons. Many believe it marks the true border between England and Scotland. In fact, it lies entirely within England. Hadrian's Wall was a great achievement, but Chatsworth House in the Derbyshire Dales on the River Dent would have left the Roman Emperor gobsmacked. Occupying 35,000 acres, this family seat of the Dukes of Devonshire is repeatedly voted Britain's best stately home. In its heyday, Chatsworth had 126 rooms, with 40 staff looking after the family's every whim. It's said 2 window cleaners worked continuously, day in and day out, to maintain a pristine view of the Dales. Chatsworth's 100-acre garden was redesigned by Capability Brown. Britain's foremost landscape architect in the 18th century. At the time, 100 gardeners kept the grounds neat and tidy. And there is a gemstone within the treasure, though a relatively modern one. This maze is made up of 1,200 small yew trees. It was created in 1962 for the 11th Duke of Devonshire. Not all stately homes of the aristocracy are houses. This one is a palace, Blenheim. It's the principal residence of the Dukes of Marlborough. Blenheim is set in about 2,000 acres of Oxfordshire parkland in Woodstock and is a World Heritage Site with over 300 years of history. It's also the only house in England to be given the title palace other than the royal family or Anglican Church. Blenheim has 187 rooms. Its English Baroque architecture is sought after by tourists and movie makers alike. James Bond's Spectre and Transformers: The Last Knight were filmed here. Blenheim is also the birthplace of Britain's most revered modern wartime leader, Sir Winston Churchill. As Prime Minister during World War II, Churchill made this iconic palace his second home. Originally built for the Duke of Buckingham in 1703, Buckingham Palace has been the official London residence of the reigning monarch since the days of Queen Victoria. And seeing the 11 a.m. changing of the guard from this vantage point makes it all the more impressive. In the 13th century, the monarch of the day, Edward I, chose Leeds Castle as his favourite residence. Often called the loveliest castle in the world, it was built on islands in a lake near Maidstone in Kent. Dating back to Norman times, it has more than 900 years of history, and like Chatsworth House, it also has a maze made of yew trees, 2,400 of them, set in a square representing a queen's crown. This was once the home of Catherine of Aragon, first wife of King Henry VIII and Queen of England. But it's not just England that boasts castles fit for queens and kings. In fact, the part of the UK with more castles than any other country in the whole of Europe is Wales. Cardiff Castle, in the heart of the Welsh capital, was also built by the Normans as early as 1081, 15 years after William the Conqueror invaded England. This castle, like many others, is a mixture of medieval and modern. In the 19th century, the great Victorian architect William Burgess added new towers, a roof garden, and this magnificent clock tower. In North Wales, one particular group of castles was constructed with a less glamorous and more strategic mission. Carnarvon Castle, built by Edward I, is the medieval jewel in the crown of a group of 8 castles known as the Ring of Iron. Carnarvon is recognised by many as one of the greatest buildings of the Middle Ages. It was part of Edward's bitter English war with Welsh princes in the 13th century. It took 47 years to build and cost a staggering £25,000. This is another of Edward's Ring of Iron castles in North Wales, Harlech. It lies almost 30 miles along the coast from Carnarvon on a spur of rock near the Irish Sea. It took 20 years to build, but cost Edward a mere £8,000, at least £8 million in today's money. Edward's castles helped him defeat the princes and put an end to Welsh independence, paving the way for Wales to become part of the United Kingdom. Scotland can also lay claim to castles that are national treasures. One of the smallest, but most beautiful, lies on a tiny island in Loch Leven, just north of Edinburgh. Its claim to fame is that in 1567, it was used as a prison for Mary, Queen of Scots. She was held there for almost a year and complained it was not fit and proper for someone of her rank. She eventually managed to escape, but 20 years later was beheaded in England. Loch Leven Castle can claim to be one of Britain's smallest castles, but back in North Wales, near Colwyn Castle, is Britain's smallest house. Key House, as it's known, was built in the ancient castle walls in the 16th century and remained in use until 1900. Its last owner was a 6'3" fisherman who moved out because he couldn't stand up in any of the rooms. Northern Ireland has its fair share of breathtaking castles. In County Antrim, Dunluce Castle rests on the steep cliffs overlooking the Atlantic. Game of Thrones fans know it as the fictional House of Greyjoy, the great castle of Pike. Long ago, Dunluce was the stronghold of the Irish and Scottish clans MacDonald and MacDonald. Today, it's protected as a national monument. Dunluce is also said to have inspired the writer C.S. Lewis when he created the capital of the Kingdom of Narnia. Game of Thrones enthusiasts will recognize this evocative coastline as one of the show's 7 kingdoms, Westeros. This is one of the most beautiful and impressive parts of the UK, and it features at least one seascape that would qualify as a top national treasure: the Giant's Causeway. One of the most distinctive rock formations on Earth, the causeway was formed around 60 million years ago during a volcanic eruption. There are around 40,000 interlocking lava columns that have been weathered by wind and waves into this dramatic landscape. It's Northern Ireland's only World Heritage Site. Legend has it that the causeway is what's left of a land bridge between Ireland and Scotland. It was created by a good Irish giant, Finn McCool, after he was challenged to a fight by a bad Scottish giant, Benandonna, who wanted to levy high taxes on the Irish. The myth has it that McCool was the winner, and the causeway was his legacy. The causeway also has another unique feature. One of the UK's smallest railways links it with the historic town of Bushmills, the oldest licensed whisky distillery in the world, founded in 1608. The Giant's Causeway is not the only landmark to have ancient myths and legends attached. Britain is full of places that have inspired writers and creative geniuses. One of the most enduring legends of them all is said to have begun here in North Cornwall in Tintagel Castle on this dramatic headland. Here, according to medieval folklore, King Arthur was conceived, with a little help from the equally mythical magician, Merlin. The legend of Camelot resonates to this day. The story of the chivalrous Knights of the Round Table, Arthur's magical sword Excalibur, and the search for the Holy Grail. The real Tintagel Castle was built by the fabulously wealthy Richard, Earl of Cornwall, between 1225 and 1233. But the legend of King Arthur ensures it's on the bucket list of many who visit the west of England every year. Tintagel may have a devoted fan base, but Glastonbury Tor in Somerset is a destination for those on a more spiritual quest. This is where, it's said, the Holy Grail, the cup used by Jesus at the Last Supper, was once located. St. Michael's Tower is all that remains of a 14th century church. The Tor is one of Britain's most ancient and spiritual sites, where pagans and Christians have worshipped for centuries. According to Arthurian legend, this was the Isle of Avalon, where Arthur slept, ready to return to his people in their hour of need. In the very heart of England lies Sherwood Forest, home of mythical figure Robin Hood. He hid here amongst the giant oak trees as he stole from the rich to give to the poor while battling the Sheriff of Nottingham and evil Prince John. In the late 15th century, when Richard III was on the throne, Sherwood Forest covered at least 100,000 acres. Today, only around 1,000 acres remain. In 2002, it was declared a National Nature Reserve. In the middle of the forest sits an ancient oak tree, measuring 33 feet around its base. It's so big, it's been supported by scaffolding since Victorian times. Approximately 800 years old, this is the tree, according to the legend, that sheltered Robin and his merry men as they slept. Just outside the forest, in the Nottinghamshire village of Edwinstowe, lies another landmark in the story. It's said that here, in the Church of St. Mary, built in the 12th century, Robin Hood and Maid Marian were married. The peaceful North Yorkshire fishing village of Whitby attributes its modern-day popularity to a novel. It's a famous place with an infamous fictional character. This is where, in 1890, the Irish author Bram Stoker is said to have conceived one of the greatest fiends in literature, Count Dracula. The novelist was inspired by the 16th century Abbey ruins, intrigued by the ever-changing light on the walls and the thousands of bats nesting in the shadows. Local folklore has it that Stoker randomly chose a book from the village library which mentioned the mysterious Transylvanian count. and envisioned a bloodthirsty vampire who enthralls and frightens in equal measure. Not all of Britain's legends are people. This is Loch Ness. 23 miles long and nearly 800 feet deep. It's home, so they say, to the Loch Ness Monster, or Nessie as she is more affectionately known. Rumours of a monster in the loch first circulated in 565. But Nessie became an international sensation in 1934, when a photograph appeared in the press purportedly showing a long-necked monster swimming in the loch. It later turned out to be a hoax. But that hasn't diminished the Loch Ness Monster business. And the legend continues to draw many thousands to the Highlands every year. Some British historical treasures don't just evoke the past, they carry on in the present. This is the village of Gretna Green in Scotland. Here, couples from all over Britain and the world run to get married. It's Scotland's capital of romance. It all began in the 18th century. In England, strict marriage laws relating to age and parental consent led to an exodus of couples wishing to wed. They raced here to take advantage of Scotland's more relaxed rules. Gretna Green is just over the border. All that's required to get legally hitched here is a simple declaration in front of 2 witnesses. Back then, the father of the bride was usually in hot pursuit. The first building a couple usually reached upon arrival was the blacksmith's, so the lovers quickly tied the knot here. And although that practice is long gone, there doesn't seem to be any let-up. Every year, at least 5,000 couples from all over the world get married at Gretna Green. Great Britain is not always a green and pleasant land. When the winter months come, its national treasures take on a different light. And Scotland is one part of the United Kingdom that usually wears harsh winters well. Snow turns attractions like Glencoe, the Great Glen, into a vast icy amphitheatre, reminiscent of its bloody past. It was here, in February 1692, that soldiers under the orders of King William III of England ambushed and slaughtered 38 members of the Clan MacDonald. Many of those who escaped the massacre perished in the snow and ice surrounding the glen. Ever since, Glencoe has been Scotland's most famous glen, but recently it's also been voted the most romantic. Romantics in search of aquatic activities need not look any further than the storied Loch Lomond. It's the largest loch in Scotland and probably the most well known after Loch Ness. It's in a valley surrounded by wooded landscapes, all within the Trossachs National Park. And this loch has its very own paddle steamer, the Maid of the Loch. It's the last of a long line of paddle boats that worked the loch in the early 19th century. Having been left to rot for decades, the Maid has now been fully restored and relaunched. to help make this place even more romantic. One of the UK's 15 national parks, the Trossachs is an area of outstanding natural beauty. It contains 700 square miles of lakes, woodlands, and 21 mountains. And the daddy of them all is Ben Nevis. At almost 4,500 feet high, it's the #1 peak in all of Britain. And this is the UK's second highest, Mount Snowdon. It's the tallest in Wales, with links to the legendary King Arthur. This part of the mountain is known in Welsh as Rhawydfa, which loosely translated means grave. In mythology, it's believed to be the final resting place of a fearsome giant slain by Arthur. And Laslan Lake, which lies to the east of the mountain, is where Arthur's magical sword, Excalibur, was thrown. And where there are mountains, there are waterfalls. This one is known as one of the 7 wonders of Wales. With its 240 feet of graceful, cascading water, Pistach Rhyadr is Britain's tallest waterfall. Truly a gem, rarely seen from above. The storied Lake District is home to England's highest peak, Scafell Pike, a popular destination for walkers. And dominating the Lake District, what is often called the most beautiful lake in Britain, Ullswater. This is also known as Wordsworth Country. The great early 19th century Romantic poet, William Wordsworth, was born here. For many years, he lived in Dove Cottage at Grasmere, just north of Lake Windermere. Windermere is the longest body of water in England. Wordsworth described it as the loveliest spot that man hath ever found. Wordsworth spent his most productive years here. His appreciation of nature and his devotion to living simply and thinking deeply put the Lake District on the map forever. Another famous wordsmith is William Shakespeare, generally acknowledged as England's greatest playwright. His birthplace, Stratford-upon-Avon, was once a small provincial Elizabethan town. Now, millions of people celebrate his life and work by visiting the town every year. Shakespeare was born in this humble house on Henley Street in April 1564. Although he was raised in the town, he didn't pen his masterpieces here. After attending Stratford's grammar school, he left to find his fortune in London. But he is buried here in Stratford-upon-Avon's Holy Trinity Church, where he was baptized. When he died, he was 52 years old and had written more than 37 plays. Among them, Hamlet, Macbeth, The Merchant of Venice, and Much Ado About Nothing. Many of Shakespeare's greatest works were history plays, involving kings and queens and the intrigues of British royalty. And this, perhaps the most valuable jewel in Britain's tourist crown, was the setting for the evil deeds depicted in Shakespeare's Richard III. The Tower of London has existed since the Middle Ages, thanks to William the Conqueror, who built the White Tower. It now belongs to Britain's monarch of the day. It's actually a royal palace, but is better known as a fearsome fortress, with its ravens and beefeaters guarding the crown jewels. The magnificent Westminster Abbey dates back to the 11th century and Edward the Confessor. It's been the setting for nearly every coronation since William's in 1066, and his was on Christmas Day. It's a church dedicated to worship, as well as a unique part of the pageantry of British life. It also serves as a final resting place or memorial for prominent citizens, as well as many kings and queens of the realm. One future king of England commissioned his own personal national treasure in the 18th century. When George IV was Prince of Wales in 1787, he commissioned a royal residence on the south coast in Brighton. Now known as the Royal Pavilion, his seaside retreat was built in 3 stages. It was intended to invoke the spirit of India and the British Raj, with architecture in the Indo-Gothic style. The domes and minarets are the work of the architect John Nash, who expanded the building in 1815. George IV died in 1830, but the pavilion continued to be used by the royal family. Finally, in 1845, Queen Victoria wrote to her aunt that the people of Brighton were indiscreet and troublesome. Its days of royal glory were over. Scotland experienced centuries of royal and parliamentary rule, and all the castles, myths and legends that accompany it. Scone Palace, near Perth, is one of Scotland's most notable sites. Once the centre of power of the ancient kingdom of Alba, Scone was the home of Scottish parliaments, and for more than 8 centuries, it was the place where Scotland's kings were crowned. Not in the palace itself, but a short distance away, here, on a grassy mound known as Moot Hill. This is a replica of the stone of Scone, where the monarch stood to receive the crown. Legend has it that the stone is sacred, having been used by Jacob as a pillow when, according to the Bible, he beheld a vision of angels. The replica stone is the result of royal machinations. In 1296, Edward I of England took the original and placed it in Westminster Abbey, so it could be used for all coronations there. Today, the Stone of Scone resides here, in Edinburgh Castle, Scotland's capital since 1437, when it replaced Scone. Wales has an ancient capital too. This is the medieval market town of Machynlleth. It was once the stronghold of rebel leader Owain Glyndŵr, a 14th century Welsh patriot who led a revolt against England's King Henry IV. This building stands on the site of the Welsh Parliament, where Owen declared an independent Welsh state and was crowned Prince of Wales by his followers. He was the last true Welshman to claim that title. Owen is still regarded as one of Wales' most heroic figures. Although his rebellion failed, he was never betrayed and remained in hiding from the English until the day he died. Another treasured locale of Wales is one of 50 Welsh islands. Caldy, the smallest of them all, lies in Carmarthen Bay. Caldy has a long and rich history. Some of the earliest monastic settlements were established here. They were remote, protected havens for contemplation and prayer. Today, this tradition is maintained by a small community of Cistercian Trappist monks who have been here since the 1920s. There might be only around 40 inhabitants, but they have their own currency, known as a dab, and also issue their own postage stamps. It's said that Caldy is a place for the soul, where the heart of Wales lies deep beneath the ground. Sometimes Britain's national treasures reveal themselves after dark. In 1879, Blackpool became the first town on Earth to have a system of streetlights powered by electricity. It takes more than 1 million bulbs to create this light show, and its funfair and illuminations remain a much-loved attraction to this day. Blackpool Tower, one of the North's most iconic landmarks, is world-renowned as the location of TV's Strictly Come Dancing. Another northern icon is the giant Anthony Gormley sculpture known as the Angel of the North. Completed in 1998, it stands 65 feet tall on the site of a 200-year-old coal mine. Made entirely of steel and weighing 150 tons, it signifies the North's transition from the industrial age to one of information technology. It cost £800,000 to make and is intended to last 100 years. When asked why an angel, Anthony Gormley replied, "Because no one has seen one, and we need to keep imagining them." J.M. Barrie had one of Britain's most fertile imaginations, not for angels, but for Peter Pan, the Lost Boys, and Tinker Bell. The house where he was born in 1860 at Kirriemuir in the Scottish Lowlands has been preserved for the nation. Barrie was moved to create Peter Pan and the world of Neverland following the death of his teenage elder brother David, who was killed in an ice skating accident when J.M. was 6. The statue of Pan in the rear garden of the Barrie house symbolizes eternal childhood. J.M. Barrie is one of only a handful of writers who've been given honorary degrees by 3 of Britain's universities. St Andrews, sitting on the east coast of Fife, is the 3rd oldest university in the English-speaking world, and Scotland's best known. It became even more famous when William met Kate here and had a royal romance. J.M. Barrie received a degree from here in 1898. Oxford University awarded him its honorary degree in 1926. It is the oldest in the English-speaking world, and the world's 2nd oldest continuous university. This city of dreaming spires, as Matthew Arnold dubbed it, has been teaching students since 1096. Cambridge, which gave Barrie an honorary degree in 1930, has been going since 1209. It started when a group of Oxford scholars left their university after a dispute with local townspeople and walked the 80 or so miles to Cambridge. Between them, Oxford and Cambridge have, to date, produced 42 British Prime Ministers and 192 Nobel Prize winners. Oxford leads Cambridge in the prime ministerial stakes with 20 to 14, but Cambridge has 120 Nobel laureates to Oxford's 72. This is Portmeirion in Gwynedd, North Wales. It's a village solely for tourists, usually open to the public 364 days a year. This bit of Baroque Italy in Wales was built between 1925 and 76. In the 1960s, Portmeirion was used as the main location for the cult sci-fi TV series The Prisoner. In it, Patrick McGoohan plays a British secret agent who is abducted, locked down, and given the number 6 as his identity. In every episode, he had to find ingenious ways to escape from idyllic Portmeirion. So, as we come to the end of our aerial journey around Britain, these have been just some of the UK's most favourite national treasures. We've seen man-made marvels and natural wonders, treasures celebrating royals and those who come from humble beginnings, legendary writers and mythical legends. They're all part of Great Britain's rich and colourful history.